I know this probably isn't the video you were expecting to see. My essay on women's rights and abuse and transphobia is in the works, but it really needs to be as good as I can possibly make it, and that needs more time. In the meantime, I've been having myself a bit of a mental health crisis as a treat. And the fact that there's a war going on, like over there, that's not helping. What will help though is a nice, comfy, sofa-based chat about autism, meltdowns and allyship. Because the thing is, I spent a significant chunk of last month recovering from meltdowns. And meltdowns and how poor mental health in general affects autistic people. It's something that's quite difficult to talk about, but it's something that's really important to understand if we do really care about advocacy. But before I get into it, please do make sure you've subscribed, you've hit the bell, and if you're looking for more ways to support the channel, you can find them in the links in the description. I will be talking about how meltdowns feel in this, and I do understand that this might be triggering to people who experience meltdown, so I've left chapters and timestamps and all the rest of it in the description. Part 1. What's a meltdown? Now, before I talk about what a meltdown is, it's important to talk about what one isn't. Mainly they're not tantrums. You might think this is basic stuff, but not only have I seen parents of autistic kids still use the word tantrum to describe meltdowns, but I've also recently become privy to a certain line of thought that goes that because tantrums are communicating distress, as do meltdowns, that there is either no need to differentiate between them, or even that to try to differentiate between them is harmful. Now, to be generous, I would assume that the idea behind this is that because a child might not have learned any other way to communicate distress apart from throwing a tantrum, that they shouldn't be judged or punished for doing so, just as any child having a meltdown should never be judged or punished for that. And with this, I would wholeheartedly agree. But there are fundamental differences between the two, which should inform the way that we approach them. Tantrums are actions with intentions and motivations behind them. They're used usually to get attention or to manipulate the situation, and they are within the tantrum thrower's control. The situation might be distressing to them, but the tantrum itself, not so much. Like if you just got up now and sort of jumped up around and stamped your feet a bit and shouted, you might tire yourself out, you might have an increase in heart rate and adrenaline rush, but in a few minutes you'll be fine. It may be a learned behaviour, it may be the only way that child has learned to behave, but it's behaviour. Meltdowns are an involuntary and dangerous neurological event in response to stress and overstimulation. I will talk about how meltdowns feel later, but before that, let's just look at meltdowns in general and how way too much stress impacts all brains. See, usually, this bit up here, your prefrontal cortex, this is busy regulating your emotions, making decisions, inhibiting your impulses, organising your thoughts and sense data and memories into something that's useful to you. It's in charge of working memory. That's your ability to recall memories when you need them to do things. It helps us stay focused on tasks, all that good stuff. It also inhibits our responses. So for example, when you're walking around the city, you've got cars and buses zooming around, people shouting, pigeons flapping, lots of noise and large moving objects. But you know that those things probably won't pose a risk to you. You have the necessary knowledge and experience to know that you can safely walk alongside the road without suddenly getting hit by a car. So you walk around calmly and you don't jump at every passing vehicle. Now imagine I took Boba into Berlin city centre. He'd panic. It might even be dangerous for his heart. He doesn't have the experience to know that all that stuff poses no risk to him, and he would act accordingly. But in times of great excitement or stress, your amygdala, that's that little bit that people like to call your reptile brain, your lizard brain, one of those, because it was like one of the first ones to evolve or things. Not a neuroscientist. Well, that starts releasing a load of hormones such as dopamine and norepinephrine. And it's like, you're in danger, things are bad, you're probably going to have to fight a bear. And then what it does, just in case, is it disconnects the links to your prefrontal cortex. Because I guess though, if you are fighting a bear, you don't want to be wasting time overthinking things. Like remembering that you've got to wash up later. But if your prefrontal cortex has been I always say that. Sorry, I probably will say that and not notice at some point in this video. Cortex. It ends weird. But anyway, if that has been disconnected together with all that working memory and, you know, your access to your experience, then suddenly those city streets might seem like a battlefield. And whatever obstacle you might then face is suddenly a whole lot more difficult to cope with. Matters are only made worse when your bloody adrenal glands kick in with a boost of adrenaline and cortisol, which you do need for bear fighting. Trust me. But you need a whole lot less when you're facing a problem that you can't fight or flee from. And yes, I do know that there's more options than fight or flee. But you know, if you want to tell me about it in the comments, go ahead, I could use the engagement. Remember, this is what goes on in all brains, neurotypical and autistic alike. Neurotypical people do get meltdowns too. In ideal scenarios, what happens after the stress has passed is that enzymes kind of undo the mess caused during the stress. So if you look at this diagram, enzymes will close this off so that the prefrontal cortex is fully connected again. However, it looks as though some people's genetics mean that their enzymes aren't quite strong enough, which can predispose them to chronic mental illness and stress. Speaking of chronic stress, if your brain is exposed to stress for longer periods of time, your amygdala can become enlarged, and you might start to lose cells in your prefrontal cortex. It's quite easy to see how this becomes a vicious cycle. More stress makes you more susceptible to stress. This also explains adrenaline junkies who become addicted to excitingly stressful situations. Their lizard brains are growing, therefore demanding more, and their prefrontal cortex is maybe shrinking, therefore failing to inhibit behaviours. It kind of flies in the face of those who would say we should expose ourselves to risk and stress to get used to it as a learning experience, doesn't it? But what about autism? It's like one of my catchphrases for this channel, isn't it? But what about autism? You said the video was about autism. Mention it. There is evidence that suggests that autistic brains respond to emotional stimuli in a different way to that of neurotypical brain. MRI scans do show that autistic brains show less activity in their prefrontal cortexes during emotional times than neurotypical ones do. There's also some evidence that suggests that maybe autistic people have an enlarged amygdala anyway, but I don't know about that one. Because like if autistic people are more prone to chronic stress and chronic stress gives you a big amygdala, I don't know, I'd have to read more, but I didn't. The primary difference between autistic meltdowns and other kinds is, on one hand, the prevalency and intensity, but crucially, difference lies in the source of the initial stress. As I argued in my video on motivation and behaviour, autistic people don't really react differently. It's the things they react to that are different. More things act as stressors to an autistic brain than to a neurotypical brain. Bright lights, loud noises, lots of movement, unexpected changes. My autistic self walking through the city centre is just more aware of all that stuff than a neurotypical brain would be. I'm already really distractible right now and there's been loads of distractions. What's happened? Alright, so I'm more aware. Did I say that bit? Yes. Right. So, a neurotypical person walking through the city, their brains, neurotypical brains, are really good at phasing out the background stuff. So all that traffic noise and other people moving around and your pigeons flapping, that's phased out, so that when there is an unexpected change to the bus schedule, for example, they're able to just focus on that. But to an autistic brain, it's all happening at the same frequency, and it's stressful. So when that unexpected change to the bus schedule pops up, the prefrontal cortex might already have been started to get unplugged by all the sensory stuff, so it's a lot more difficult to cope with. Does this mean I can't go into the city without having a meltdown? No. Does this mean that lots of sense data will always cause a meltdown? No. Does this mean that I can never cope with an unexpected change? Also no. But just as you have bad days, you have bad days, don't you? Days which are just harder to cope with than others. So too do autistic people. Shocker. And on those days, we may be more susceptible to meltdown. Part 2. Bad days. Autistic people are way more likely than the general population to experience chronic stress, poor mental health, and physical health conditions and disabilities. The list of comorbidities that are associated with autism include mental health and mood conditions, other neurodivergencies, and physical disabilities alike. And it can be extremely difficult for autistic people to access appropriate care. Medical professionals might not fully understand the links between, say, autism and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and so might not realise that what is usually a very rare condition in the general population is suddenly a whole lot more likely when it comes to dealing with an autistic patient. And standard therapeutic techniques used to treat mental health and mood disorders have been shown to be less effective for autistic patients, whose stress and anxiety might be more likely caused by environmental factors and physical reactions, rather than unhealthy thought patterns or psychology. Anyone, autistic or not, who has lived with chronic pain or health conditions will know well the feedback loop involved in poor physical and mental health. One begets the other, which begets the other. It's just vicious cycles all over, innit? And this, of course, is all compounded by that whole social communication differences us autistics are famous for. We might find it hard to communicate our needs or ask for help. We may be misunderstood. In fact, chances are we will be misunderstood. We might face pushback from people who think we're over-exaggerating, being overly sensitive, and just need to try a bit harder. We are way more likely to have a history of being bullied and all the trauma and social anxieties which can stem from this. And so all of this leads to loneliness, alienation, and isolation. Isolation, famously, being quite deadly for human beings. The worse our mental and physical health, the more likely we are to have meltdowns. And the more meltdowns we have, the more likely we are to be misunderstood, abandoned, or worse. Before I talk about my experience of meltdowns and how they feel for me, there is an elephant in this very nice room named privilege that I need to address. Firstly, if I was ever to have a meltdown in public, I wouldn't be too afraid of being arrested and possibly murdered by the police. For example, a very real risk facing autistic people who are also otherwise marginalised. Secondly, the chances of having mental or physical illnesses is made more or less likely due to socio-economic factors. At this point in my life, I am lucky enough to be supported by a partner who is able to provide me a level of financial security that I had never previously enjoyed. If my wrists and hands hurt, I can buy supportive gloves. If my sweatpants get all bobbly and itchy and unpleasant on the senses, I can buy new ones. If I don't have the spoons to cook tonight, we can order takeout. I'm just assuming you guys know what the spoons means. Assuming you guys are fully versed in spoon theory. If not, that's your homework. Google spoon theory. Again, where was I? Oh yeah, talking about all the things I have. Oh, my shiny stuff. We have a dishwasher. A dishwasher. For crying out loud. You just put the dirty plates in and it comes out clean. The future in this house is now. I also have a couple of fairly stable relatives who probably wouldn't let me go completely unhoused. That's more than a lot of people have. Being able to have a pet in a rented apartment and being able to afford his care. Being able to spend time on my special interests or take a day off if I have a migraine or a chronic pet, a chronic pear, or a chronic pain flare up. All these things make me leagues ahead of other autistic people who are trying to prevent and recover from meltdowns. And we have a dishwasher. Did I mention the dishwasher? My life is changed. It's actually a really good example. Washing dishes at the sink was always a sensory nightmare for me. I'm also just quite squeamish about food, especially old food in general, so there was no cutting corners either. I wanted my plates clean, I just hated doing it. Hated it. I never, ever got used to it. I washed up at a sink most days for my whole adult life. My hatred never diminished, it only got worse. Because my hatred for washing up wasn't just a preference. The sensory experience of washing up was just too much and it triggered my stress responses. And as we've just learned, stress responses beget stress responses. And in autistic people, stress begets meltdowns. So on low spoon days, I could not wash up, couldn't even contemplate it, which meant that it built up, which meant that whenever I did have the spoons to do it, it took way more than it should do, which meant that I had to choose washing up over other things that I might enjoy and which might be more beneficial to my mental and physical health. Since we moved into this apartment, even on pretty bad days, I can still manage to put my plate in the dishwasher rather than on the side, meaning that now I never get that build-up of mess which had previously been an ever-present source of stress. So when I say my dishwasher was life-changing, I really mean that. But I still do get meltdowns. And in the next chapter, I'm going to tell you what that's like. Part 3. How it feels. This section contains descriptions of meltdowns from my perspective. If that's not something you want to hear about right now, skip to the timestamp shown on the screen. For me, a meltdown starts off feeling like my prefrontal cortex is being electrocuted. It's a very physical feeling, but I also can't hold a rational thought in my mind at all. As my heart rate increases, my ears become full of the sound of my own pulse. My tinnitus becomes deafening. My vision darkens and narrows. It feels like shutting down. As it progresses, every muscle in my body tenses up and there is nothing I can do to untense them. It hurts. A lot. Breathing becomes erratic. This can, and often does, trigger a panic attack as well, in which I'll hyperventilate, and if I don't manage to lay down on my front, I risk becoming very faint and dizzy. By now, I will be crying a lot. My head will be pounding and buzzing, like there's 1,000 bees in there, panicking, stinging. It feels like my brain is going to burst through my skull, through my eyes and nose. My heart rate is making me feel sick. I've been on the floor for a while now, but I'm unsure how much time has passed. I still can't think, but I am aware. Painfully aware, but out of control. Like a surgery patient on not quite enough anaesthetic. Sometimes, movements, like rocking or swaying, can keep my muscles from tensing so much that I cramp up completely. It just feels right, but I know it looks wrong. I can't think. I can't form sentences. I can't express my needs or answer questions. But vocalizations, they can pacify the brain bees. They can stop me from clenching my jaw so tight that my teeth crack. I repeat words. Oh no, oh no, oh no. It just feels right. But I know it sounds wrong. Telling my brain to stop it. But it doesn't stop. There's no stopping it. There's only exhaustion. On very bad days, during very painful meltdowns, my self-regulatory movements can turn into self-injurious behaviour. Have you ever heard a story about someone who's experienced, for whatever reason, excruciating pain, like something inside them is going very, very wrong and they try to claw whatever it is out of them? I remember hearing Jessica Kelbrin-Fozard, she's a YouTuber, disability and LGBT stuff. I tell you to go subscribe, but I think she's doing all right. You probably all are subscribed. I remember she told the story about the moment she lost sight in one of her eyes. Something went wrong with the optic nerve suddenly, and it hurt so much that she said she was trying to claw her own eye out. A decision that later would have been quite regrettable when the pain meds kicked in. But when one is in excruciating pain, weighing up the pros and cons isn't really a thing you can do. Your entire being is focused on stopping the pain by whatever means necessary. The source of the pain during meltdowns is the brain. But, I mean, it's the source of all pain, always. But you get me. You get me, right? You get me. Yeah. Brain bees. And so you can start to understand maybe why some autistic people injure their heads during meltdown. Maybe it's a surprise for you, even shocking, to see me sitting here and then to imagine me in a situation like that. It's certainly a bit humiliating for me to be sharing this with the internet, But it's really important for people to understand that autistic adults have meltdowns too. And it's important for them to understand what it's like and how it affects us. During a meltdown, my entire body is sending pain signals to my brain, and my brain responds accordingly by panicking and assuming that I must be dying. And that is exactly what it feels like. Part 4, recovery. In my experience, how long it takes to recover from a meltdown depends significantly on the severity of the meltdown. But again, in my experience, in the very least, I'm done for the rest of the day. I know that a meltdown is over when that feeling of electrocution isn't there anymore. It's just still and painful. I can breathe normally, can answer simple questions, take a sip of water, blow my nose, all that stuff that I wanted to do during the meltdown but couldn't. I know it's over when I can do those things, but I feel like I've done rounds with an MMA champ. My whole body aches. My muscles are still stiff and will be for the rest of the day, if not longer. My face is contorted into a perma-frown. I have that kind of headache that you get when you haven't eaten or drank anything for way too long. I can think again, but my speech is very limited. My face hurts. My sinuses are inflamed. My eyes are bloodshot. The muscles around my eyes are tense and twitchy. My tinnitus is still deafening. The neck injury I have will be flaring up as well due to the tension in the muscles around it. Loud noises, bright lights, anything chaotic, anything even remotely stressful. I cannot cope with it. Treat me like someone in the throes of a migraine. If I have a meltdown in the morning, that's how I'm guaranteed to feel for the rest of the day. And sometimes it can take several days for these symptoms to wear off. The things I am able to do are very limited. And the things that I should do are even more so. If I don't take it extremely easy post-meltdown, the chances of me having another or just carrying the pains of that one with me for weeks is very high. The best thing for me personally is to be able to lie somewhere comfortable, tucked in with blankets, something calming, preferably nostalgic to watch, and lots of food and drink. A bath can help a great deal too. Autistic people can often struggle with interoception and proprioception, which is being aware of how your body is feeling and where it is in space. And this can flare up before and after a meltdown. I find that being submerged in warm water can be very grounding. It's also relaxing on the muscles, of course. But again, how many people realistically can just take a recovery day whenever they need? Or even have things like a bath or a big sofa? And this is just the physical consequences of a non-injurious meltdown. So these are just the physical consequences of a meltdown in which I didn't directly injure myself during the meltdown. But then the emotional consequences on top of that, well, that's just a whole other kind of fish altogether. It doesn't matter how much I know that I shouldn't feel ashamed over something that I can't help. You do, don't you? You can't help it. It is embarrassing. And if I thought that I was being perceived by strangers, it would make it 100 times worse. Because I don't want to be doing that. I do not want to be having a meltdown. And afterwards, when I think back on how it was, it's like an attack on my identity. I don't feel like myself during a meltdown. You wouldn't recognise me now in me then? And if I thought, for example, just for the sake of argument, that someone was, say, filming my meltdown and plan to, say, post it onto social media or YouTube, well, I might feel some way about that. Part 5, Advocacy. There's a few reasons why I wanted to make this video. Firstly, because it's what I've been going through the past month and the reason why I haven't been able to keep up with my upload schedule. But secondly, because April is Autism Awareness Month. Yay. Autism Awareness Month comes once a year, a month in which autistic advocates put themselves through hell, burning themselves out, creating contents, attending events, giving speeches and interviews, usually all for free, and then are expected to defend their advocacy against angry autism parents who think that they should be in charge. The kinds of parents who would post their children's meltdowns on social media in the name of advocacy. The kind of parent who centres their own experience of what it's like having to live with an autistic child. Autism advocacy is a fairly new concept. Autism Awareness Day was only started in 2007, and historically autism advocacy was done by parents for parents, and that autistic kids grow into autistic adults is apparently news to a lot of people, especially those people who would use their children's worst moments for social media clout. Those children will grow up and they will see that, and I can't even begin to imagine how that would feel. Thirdly, I made this video because I just think it's really important for non-autistic allies to realise that we need help. Autism might be a superpower, but even superheroes get help. It's not a superpower, I hate that narrative. Oh, we're going to get so much of that this month. Autistic people should always be the ones leading the way when it comes to autism advocacy. And this is only just beginning to shift in that direction. But this does not mean that non-autistic allies get to just sit back and leave us to it. Listen to us, learn from us. Do not speak over us. Do not post our meltdowns on social media, but do help us. I became interested in learning about autism when I first considered it for myself in around late 2018, when I watched a YouTube video by an autistic woman about stimming. It's kind of funny to think now that stimming was the thing that sparked the idea of autism in my mind, and like now I'm pretty much convinced that I also have ADHD, but that's another video. But the point is that since then I have watched countless activists, advocates, writers, creators burn themselves out, become mentally unwell, and even have to quit advocacy work altogether, including the woman who made that video that first brought me into this space. There is also a trend I've noticed of female autistic advocates being burned out to the point of quitting more often. I think this is probably to do with the tendency for internet users to be extra abusive towards women and femme people. The internet is an amazing resource for autistic people. I've spoken a lot about this before. It allows us to form community and spread our message for the first time ever. But that also opens us up to the horrors of the comment section and direct abuse. Being misunderstood is a widely cited trigger of meltdowns. Let me know in the comment section if you can't cope with this either. The feeling that you are unable to make yourself understood by others can be a terrifying experience for an autistic person. It's one that is very pervasive in autistic lives. And the fact is that creating content online will always come with people misinterpreting your words, purposefully or otherwise, and then holding you accountable for their misinterpretation. This can put a lot of people off doing content creation or becoming a public figure. But for autistic people, there is a very probable risk to our mental well-being and physical health and safety when we take on such work. So it would be nice if autistic and generally neurodivergent advocates could have the luxury of not being the only ones to remind people to consider neurodivergency, the only ones to ask the question, how would this impact neurodivergent people? To speak out against harmful languages and assumptions in everyday life. Because I am watching activists and creators burning themselves out at an alarming rate, and in so doing, understandably putting other people off entering this line of work. As I have repeatedly argued, capitalist society is fundamentally opposed to autistic well-being and health. One day we might have a society which nurtures autistic thriving, but that's not this day. This day, we must work with what we have. And this day, we need your help. Thank you for watching. Come follow me on things, and I will see you next time. Thanks again for watching. I just want to make clear that my personal experience of burnout and mental ill health these past few weeks is not because of my content creation work. I know that I do not owe the internet engagement, and this is why I have felt comfortable with taking that aspect of my life a bit easy. My supporters over at Patreon have been so unbelievably understanding. I cherish you all. You are my rocks and my motivation. If you like my work, please do consider joining them. For a few dollars a month, you can support this channel, get access to exclusive content, and other perks. Happy Autism Month, everyone. Bye. Boba has been sleeping on the floor, just there, this whole time. I have treats on my person to try and attract him, and he's been there on the floor, out of frame. See your people. Go on, greet your fans.